Have you ever felt that gut-wrenching moment when someone you trusted completely blindsides you? You know that feeling, right? When your business partner, who swore loyalty, suddenly starts their own competing venture. When your colleague, who smiled at every meeting, is the same person spreading rumors behind your back. When someone you considered a close friend ghosts you without explanation, and you're left standing there thinking, how did I miss the signs? Was I really that blind? Here's the uncomfortable truth. You weren't blind. You just weren't looking in the right direction. Most of us spend our entire lives surrounded by people, in offices, cafes, relationships, family gatherings, yet we remain strangers to the very creatures we interact with daily. Humans. We think we understand people. We believe our judgments are accurate. But then reality hits us like a freight train, and we realize we've been reading a completely different book than the one in front of us. This is the single biggest blind spot that costs people their careers, their relationships, and sometimes their entire life trajectory. And the irony? The solution has been hiding in plain sight all along. Think about the last major decision you made about another person. Maybe you hired someone who seemed perfect in the interview. Maybe you entered a relationship with someone who checked all your boxes. Maybe you trusted a friend with something important. Now ask yourself, did you actually understand that person, or did you understand the version of them you wanted to see? That question makes you uncomfortable, doesn't it? Good, because discomfort is where real growth begins. The invisible lens. Here's what nobody tells you about human perception. Your brain is not a camera recording objective reality. It's more like a film director creating a story based on its own scripts, biases, and past experiences. When you meet someone for the first time, your mind goes into overdrive. Within seconds, literally seconds, you've already constructed an entire narrative about who this person is, their appearance, the way they stand, their tone of voice, even the micro-expressions on their face. Your brain processes all of this and creates what psychologists call a heuristic, a mental shortcut. And here's the kicker. You believe this shortcut is the truth, but it's not. It's your brain's best guess based on limited information, filtered through every experience you've ever had, every bias you've collected, every fear you carry, and every desire you hold. Let me put this in perspective. Imagine you're walking into a networking event. You spot two people across the room. One is dressed in an expensive suit, standing tall, speaking confidently to a small group. The other is casually dressed, sitting alone, looking at their phone. Your brain instantly creates stories. The suited person must be successful, influential, worth connecting with. The casual person is probably shy, not very important, maybe even antisocial. But what if I told you the suited person is drowning in debt, compensating for massive insecurity by projecting confidence? What if the casually dressed person is a self-made millionaire who doesn't care about appearances because they've already proven everything they needed to prove? You'd have completely misjudged both of them based on surface-level observations. This happens every single day, at work, in dating, in friendships, in family dynamics. We're constantly judging books by covers we've designed in our own minds. The enemy within now. Here comes the part that most personal development content won't tell you because it's too harsh, too direct. But you're here for the truth, so let's go there. The biggest obstacle to understanding other people isn't them. It's you. Your ego, your insecurities, your need to be right, your fear of being wrong, your desire to feel superior, your anxiety about being inferior, all of these internal forces are constantly warping your perception of reality. Think about someone you dislike. Really bring them to mind. Got them? Now ask yourself honestly, what specific trait do you dislike most about them? Is it their arrogance, their neediness, their dishonesty, their selfishness, their lack of accountability? Here's the psychological truth that's been validated in study after study. The traits we most strongly reject in others are often the traits we're unconsciously battling within ourselves. Carl Jung called this the shadow. Modern psychology calls it projection. If you can't stand arrogant people, there's a good chance you're wrestling with your own relationship with confidence and humility. If you're constantly frustrated by needy people, you might be suppressing your own legitimate needs for connection. If dishonesty triggers you intensely, you might be avoiding uncomfortable truths in your own life. This isn't some mystical concept. This is your brain protecting you from seeing parts of yourself you've labeled as unacceptable. And the cruel irony? While you're busy judging everyone else, you're missing the most important insight of all. You can't accurately read other people until you've learned to read yourself. The self-deception trap. Let's do a quick experiment. I want you to answer this question honestly, even if just to yourself. In the last major conflict you had with someone, what percentage of the blame belongs to you? If you immediately thought, well, maybe 20 to 30%, congratulations. You've just demonstrated exactly what I'm talking about. Research shows that in conflicts, most people assign themselves roughly 30% of the blame and the other person 70%. But here's the mathematical impossibility. If both sides do this, that's 60% total blame with 40% mysteriously vanishing into thin air. Your brain is an expert at self-deception. It has to be. If you truly saw yourself with complete objectivity, every petty thought, every selfish impulse, every moment of cowardice, every instance of dishonesty, you'd struggle to function. So your mind creates what psychologists call ego defense mechanisms. You rationalize, you justify, you reframe, you conveniently forget details that make you look bad. You emphasize details that make you look good. And you do this so automatically, so seamlessly, that you genuinely believe your distorted version is objective reality. Here's a powerful example. Think about your last job change or major career move. When you tell people about it, what story do you tell? I'm willing to bet it's a story where you come out looking pretty good, right? You left for better opportunities, or because the company wasn't aligned with your values, or because you outgrew the role. But if you're brutally honest with yourself, and I mean really honest, were there moments of fear? Moments where you ran away from challenges instead of facing them? Moments where your ego was bruised and you left to protect it? Moments where you simply failed and don't want to admit it? I'm not saying your positive narrative is false. I'm saying it's incomplete. And that incompleteness is your mind protecting you from uncomfortable truths. The breakthrough moment. So if we can't trust our perceptions, if we can't even trust our own memories and narratives about ourselves, how do we navigate this minefield? The answer is simultaneously simple and incredibly difficult. radical self-awareness. This doesn't mean beating yourself up. It doesn't mean assuming you're always wrong. It means developing the mental muscle to observe yourself with the same scrutiny you observe others. Here's what that looks like in practice. When you feel a strong emotional reaction to someone, pause. Don't just accept the feeling as justified. Ask, why am I feeling this so intensely? What button is this pressing in me? What does my reaction reveal about my own fears, desires, or unresolved issues? When you make a quick judgment about someone, question it. Your brain loves certainty, but certainty is often the enemy of truth. Ask, what assumptions am I making? What evidence contradicts my initial assessment? What might I be missing? When you're convinced you're right and someone else is wrong, zoom out. Ask, is it possible I'm operating from incomplete information? Is it possible they have context I don't? Is it possible my ego is invested in being right more than finding truth? This is exhausting work. Your brain will resist it because it requires constant vigilance, constant humility, constant willingness to be uncomfortable. But this is the price of genuine understanding. The mirror principle. Here's a framework that will fundamentally change how you see people. Every person you encounter is a mirror reflecting something about yourself back to you. This doesn't mean everything is about you. That would be narcissism. It means your reactions to people reveal your internal landscape. When you admire someone intensely, you're often seeing qualities you possess, but haven't fully owned. When you despise someone intensely, you're often seeing qualities you possess but have disowned. The people who trigger you the most are your greatest teachers about yourself. I learned this the hard way. Years ago, I had a colleague, let's call him Marcus, who drove me absolutely insane. Everything about him irritated me. The way he spoke over people in meetings, his constant need to be the smartest person in the room, his inability to admit when he didn't know something. I spent months complaining about Marcus, to friends, to my partner, to anyone who would listen. And then one day, someone asked me a simple question that changed everything. Why does he bother you so much? Not, isn't he annoying? Not, I know, right? Just, why does he bother you so much? I started to answer with the obvious, because he's arrogant but I stopped mid-sentence, because in that moment, I saw it. Marcus wasn't bothering me because of who he was. He was bothering me because he was acting out behaviors I had ruthlessly suppressed in myself. Growing up, I'd been taught that speaking up was arrogant, that admitting uncertainty was weakness, that needing validation was pathetic. So I buried those parts of myself so deep, I'd forgotten they existed. And there was Marcus, doing all the things I'd forbidden myself to do, and thriving. That realization didn't make me like Marcus's behavior, but it freed me from the emotional charge. I could finally see him clearly as a person with his own insecurities and coping mechanisms, instead of through the distorted lens of my own unresolved issues. The fundamental shift. Once you start seeing yourself clearly, something remarkable happens. You start seeing others clearly too, because you're no longer projecting your unresolved stuff onto them. You're no longer using them as screens for your own internal movie. You're actually seeing them as separate, complex human beings with their own histories, wounds, desires, and defense mechanisms. This is what true empathy looks like. Not the shallow, I feel bad for you kind, but the deep, I see you as a complete human being separate from my needs and judgments kind. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more you understand yourself, the less you feel the need to judge others, because you realize everyone is fighting battles you know nothing about. That person who's always defensive probably grew up in an environment where vulnerability meant danger. That person who can't stop talking about their achievements, likely wrestling with deep-seated feelings of inadequacy. That person who avoids conflict at all costs probably learned early that expressing anger led to abandonment or punishment. You don't need to excuse harmful behavior, but you can understand it without making it about you, your starting point. So here's where we begin this journey into human nature, not with studying others, but with studying yourself. For the next week, I want you to try something. Every time you have a strong reaction to someone, positive or negative, write it down. Not what they did, but what you felt and why you think you felt it. Sarah interrupted me in the meeting. I felt disrespected and angry. Why? Because I already feel like my ideas aren't valued, and this confirmed that fear. James complimented my presentation. I felt embarrassed and deflected. Why? Because accepting praise feels unsafe, like I'm setting myself up for failure when I inevitably disappoint. Track the patterns. Your repeated reactions reveal your core wounds, fears, and beliefs about yourself and the world. This is not comfortable work. You'll discover things about yourself you'd rather not see. You'll realize you've been operating from fear or ego more often than you'd like to admit. But this discomfort is the doorway to freedom. Because once you see your patterns, you can start to change them. Once you understand your filters, you can start to remove them. And once you stop projecting your internal world onto everyone else, you can finally start seeing reality clearly. The invitation. We're about to go deep into the 18 laws that govern human nature. We're going to explore why people do what they do, why they hide what they hide, and how you can navigate the complex social world with wisdom instead of naivety. But all of that starts here with this fundamental truth. The journey to understanding others begins with understanding yourself. So before we move forward, I need you to make a commitment, not to me, but to yourself. Commit to honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Commit to curiosity about yourself, about others, about why things are the way they are. Commit to humility, to accepting that you don't have all the answers, that your perceptions are limited, that you're capable of being wrong. If you can make these commitments, the insights coming in the next sections won't just be information, they'll be transformation. Are you ready? Because what comes next is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about human behavior, relationships, and power. But first, you needed to understand this. The lens through which you see the world isn't objective. It's deeply personal. And until you clean that lens, everything you see will be distorted. Now that you know this, we can begin. Let me ask you something that might sting a little. When was the last time you made a truly logical decision? Not a decision you later justified with logic. That's different. I'm talking about a decision where you gathered all the facts, weighed them objectively without any emotional interference, and arrived at a purely rational conclusion. Can't think of one? That's because it probably never happened. Here's what the latest neuroscience reveals. And it's going to upset a lot of people who pride themselves on being rational thinkers. Every significant decision you've ever made was driven primarily by emotion, then reverse engineered with logic to make you feel good about it. Your career choice? Emotion. Your relationship decisions? Emotion. That house you bought? Emotion. The friend you cut off? Emotion. The business you started? Emotion. And here's the kicker. You had no idea this was happening. Your conscious mind genuinely believes it's running the show. It thinks it's the CEO making executive decisions based on data and analysis. But the truth is more humbling. Your conscious mind is more like a PR department, constantly spinning stories to explain decisions that were already made by the emotional parts of your brain. This isn't a defect. This is how humans are wired. And once you understand this, really understand it, you'll never look at human behavior the same way again. The great illusion. Let me paint you a picture. It's Sunday evening. You're scrolling through job listings even though you have a decent position. You come across two opportunities. Job A, higher salary, better title, prestigious company, located in a city you've never been particularly drawn to. The role itself sounds fine, not exciting, but respectable. Your parents would be proud. Your LinkedIn connections would be impressed. Job B, slightly lower salary, smaller company, less impressive on paper. But the work itself makes your heart beat a little faster. The team seems genuine. The mission resonates with something deep in you. The location is a place you've always dreamed of living. Which one do you choose? Now, here's where it gets interesting. Let's say you chose Job A. If I asked you why, you'd probably give me a very logical answer. Well, it's a 25% salary increase, the company has better benefits, and it's a smarter career move long term. I have to think about my future. Sounds rational, right? Except it's not. The real reason, the one you might not even be conscious of, could be fear. Fear of disappointing your parents, fear of being seen as foolish for choosing passion over prestige, fear that if you follow your heart and it doesn't work out, you'll have no one to blame but yourself. Or maybe you chose Job B. Your reasoning. Life's too short to do work I don't care about. I need to follow my passion. Money isn't everything. Also sounds rational, also isn't. The real driver might be a deep need for validation that you're different from everyone else, or rebellion against parental expectations, or fear of becoming the person you swore you'd never be, comfortable but dead inside. In both cases, emotion made the decision. Logic just showed up afterward with a briefcase full of justifications. The emotional underground. Your emotions are like an underground river running beneath everything you do. Most of the time, you don't even see it. You just see the landscape it shapes above ground and assume that landscape appeared naturally. But every mountain of logic you build is sitting on an emotional foundation. Here's how it works neurologically. Your limbic system, the emotional center of your brain, processes information about 200 milliseconds faster than your prefrontal cortex, the rational part. 200 milliseconds might not sound like much, but in brain time, it's an eternity. By the time your rational brain starts analyzing a situation, your emotional brain has already made a judgment and started flooding your body with chemicals to support that judgment. You meet someone new. Within milliseconds, your amygdala has scanned them for threat signals. Your emotional memory has compared them to everyone you've ever met, and your body has released a cocktail of neurochemicals that create a feeling about this person. Then, only then, does your conscious mind kick in and start creating a narrative. I like this person because they seem competent and trustworthy. But the truth is simpler and more primal. You like them because they remind you of someone who made you feel safe when you were 7 years old. The decision autopsy. Let's do something uncomfortable. Think about a major decision you've made in the last year. Really pick one. Got it. Now, I'm going to walk you through an emotional autopsy of that decision. This might reveal things you've been avoiding. Question 1. What were you feeling in the weeks leading up to this decision? Not thinking, feeling. Were you anxious, excited, frustrated, scared, angry, hopeful? Write it down. Be specific, because that emotional state was the soil in which your decision grew. Question 2. What did you fear would happen if you didn't make this decision? Notice I said fear, not think. What was the emotional consequence you were trying to avoid? Regret? Shame? Disappointment? Being left behind? Proving someone right about you? This fear was probably more influential than any logical pros and cons list. Question 3. What did you hope would happen if you made this decision? Again, emotionally, not logically. Did you hope to feel free, validated, successful, admired, at peace, vindicated? This hope was the magnet pulling you forward. Question 4. Looking back now, how much of your logical reasoning was actually just you finding evidence to support what you already emotionally wanted to do? Be honest. Did you research both sides equally? Or did you Google things like why decision you wanted is the right choice? Did you seek out opinions from people you knew would support you? Did you dismiss counterarguments as not understanding your situation? This is confirmation bias in action, your logical mind serving your emotional desires. If you answer these questions honestly, you're probably seeing a pattern. Your emotion decided. Your logic explained. The 4 emotional puppet masters. Now that you know emotions are running the show, let's talk about the 4 master emotions that control most human behavior. Understanding these is like getting a cheat code to human nature. 1. Fear. Fear is the most powerful emotional driver, and it comes in more flavors than people realize. There's obvious fear, physical danger, financial ruin, death. But most fear is subtle. Fear of irrelevance. Why people overshare on social media. Fear of missing out. Why people say yes when they mean no. Fear of being ordinary. Why people chase status symbols. Fear of being abandoned. Why people stay in toxic relationships. Fear of their own potential. Why people self-sabotage. The interesting thing about fear, it rarely announces itself. Instead, it disguises itself as practicality, caution, or wisdom. I'm not afraid to start that business. I'm just being realistic about market conditions. I'm not afraid of commitment. I'm just not ready yet. I'm not afraid to speak up. I'm just picking my battles. Translation, I'm terrified, but I'd rather die than admit it, even to myself. 2. Desire. Desire is fear's twin sibling. If fear is pushing you away from pain, desire is pulling you toward pleasure. But just like fear, desire is rarely what it appears to be on the surface. You desire a promotion, but why? Is it really about the work, or is it about the feeling of being chosen? The status, the ability to prove something to someone? You desire a relationship, but why? Is it about genuine connection, or is it about filling a void, being validated, not being alone? You desire money, but why? Is it about security, or is it about the feeling of winning, being respected, having control? Most people never ask why deep enough to reach the real desire, so they chase things that can't actually satisfy them. A brilliant example. I know a woman, let's call her Rachel, who spent 10 years climbing the corporate ladder in finance. She reached VP level at 34. Everything she'd worked for, everything she thought she wanted. And she was miserable. Why? Because her real desire wasn't career success. It was her father's approval. He'd been a successful banker. She'd unconsciously spent a decade trying to prove she was worthy of his attention. But he'd passed away when she was 28. She was trying to earn approval from a ghost. Once she realized this, everything changed. She quit, became a teacher, makes a fraction of the income, and she's happier than she's ever been because she's finally pursuing her own desires, not inherited ones. 3. Validation. This is the sneakiest one because it masquerades as confidence. Validation is the emotional need to have others confirm that you're okay, that you matter, that you're valuable. And modern society runs on it like gasoline. Why do people post their accomplishments on social media? Validation. Why do people name drop? Validation. Why do people get defensive when criticized? Lack of internal validation. Why do people fish for compliments? Validation. Here's the test. If everyone you knew disappeared tomorrow, how much of what you currently do would you still do? If the answer is not much, congratulations. You're running primarily on external validation. Your decisions aren't really yours. They're crowdsourced. The validation trap is particularly insidious because it creates a never-ending cycle. External validation feels good, but it never lasts. So you need another hit, and another, and another. It's cocaine for the ego. And just like cocaine, the more you use it, the more you need it to feel normal. People become validation junkies without even realizing it. 4. Tribal belonging. Humans are hardwired for belonging. For most of evolutionary history, being cast out of your tribe meant death. So we developed an almost pathological need to fit in, to be accepted, to be part of the group. This need is so strong that people will violate their own values to maintain belonging. You see this everywhere. The person who laughs at the offensive joke because everyone else is laughing. The employee who stays silent about unethical practices because speaking up might mean social exile. The teenager who starts smoking because their friend group smokes. The adult who pretends to enjoy wine tasting because that's what sophisticated people do. Tribal belonging explains why smart people do stupid things in groups. Their individual intelligence gets overridden by the emotional need to stay connected to the tribe. Here's a personal example. I once joined a mastermind group of entrepreneurs. Brilliant people, successful people, and they all swore by a particular business strategy that, to me, seemed fundamentally flawed. I had data. I had counterexamples. I had logic. But I kept my mouth shut for 3 months. Why? Because I wanted to belong. I didn't want to be the contrarian, the difficult one, the outsider. Finally, I spoke up, presented my case. And you know what happened? Half the group admitted they'd had the same doubts, but were also afraid to speak up. We were all intelligent people, making ourselves stupid for the sake of belonging. The emotional manipulation playbook. Now, here's where this gets really important. Once you understand that emotions drive decisions, you realize that anyone who understands this can manipulate you. And they do. Every single day, advertisers don't sell you products. They sell you emotional states. That car commercial isn't about the car's features. It's about selling you the feeling of freedom or status or adventure. They know you won't buy a car because it has 28 miles per gallon. You'll buy it because it makes you feel like the person you want to be. Politicians don't win elections with policy details. They win with emotional resonance, fear of the other side, hope for a better future, anger at injustice, belonging to a movement. The specific policies almost don't matter as long as the emotional connection is strong. Manipulative people in your life use the same playbook. The romantic partner who makes you feel special, then gradually makes you feel like you'd be nothing without them. Fear of abandonment. The boss who gives you just enough praise to keep you hooked, but never quite enough to feel secure. Desire for validation. The friend who makes you feel guilty every time you set a boundary. Tribal belonging. These people aren't necessarily evil geniuses. They're just, often unconsciously, exploiting the same emotional patterns that govern all human behavior. The emotional tells. So how do you protect yourself? How do you make decisions that aren't entirely hijacked by emotions? First, you learn to recognize your own emotional tells, the signals that you're being emotionally driven without realizing it. Tell number 1, urgency. If you feel a sudden, intense need to make a decision right now, that's emotion talking. Logic doesn't rush. Fear does. Desire does. I need to buy this stock today before the price goes up equals fear of missing out. If I don't text them right now, they'll think I'm not interested equals anxiety. I have to quit this job immediately equals anger or frustration. When you feel urgency, that's your signal to slow down. Tell number 2, absolute certainty. When you're 100% certain you're right and anyone who disagrees is wrong, that's not logic. That's ego protecting an emotional investment. Logic lives in nuance. Logic can say, I believe this is the best option based on current information, but I could be wrong. Emotion says, I know I'm right, and anyone who disagrees is stupid. Tell number 3, defensive reactions. If someone questions your decision and you immediately feel attacked, that's a sign the decision was emotionally driven. When decisions are truly logical, you can discuss them calmly. You can consider new information. You can change your mind. When decisions are emotional, questioning them feels like a personal attack. Tell number 4, avoiding certain information. Do you find yourself not wanting to read the counterargument, not wanting to talk to people who might disagree, not wanting to consider the downsides? That's your emotional brain protecting its decision from logical interference. The emotional awareness practice. Here's the practical application. I want you to start catching yourself in real time. The next time you're about to make any decision, big or small, pause and ask, what am I feeling right now? Not thinking, feeling? Name the emotion. Is it excitement, anxiety, hope, fear, anger, validation seeking? What is this emotion trying to protect me from or get me toward? Is fear trying to keep you safe? Is desire trying to fill a void? Is validation seeking trying to prove your worth? If I felt completely neutral, would I still make this decision? This is the killer question. If the emotion disappeared, would the logic still hold up? What would I tell my best friend to do in this exact situation? We're often wiser about other people's lives because we're not emotionally invested. So temporarily remove yourself. What would objective you advise? The emotional intelligence breakthrough. Now, here's the plot twist that most people miss. The goal isn't to eliminate emotions from decision-making. That's impossible and undesirable. Emotions contain valuable information. Fear can alert you to real dangers. Desire can point you toward genuine fulfillment. Emotions make life worth living. The goal is to make emotions your advisor, not your dictator. Here's what that looks like. You feel excited about a business opportunity. Instead of ignoring the excitement, trying to be purely logical, or being ruled by it, jumping in impulsively, you acknowledge it and investigate it. I'm feeling really excited about this. Let me examine why. Is this genuine alignment with my goals, or is it desperation to escape my current situation? Is this excitement about the opportunity itself, or about the story I'll get to tell? You use emotion as data, not as a decision. Same with fear. You feel afraid of making a career change. Instead of letting fear stop you or forcing yourself to push through it, you investigate. I'm feeling afraid. What specifically am I afraid of? Is this fear warning me of a real danger I'm not seeing? Or is it just my comfort zone resisting growth? Is this fear protecting me or imprisoning me? This is emotional intelligence in action. Reading emotional patterns in others. Once you get good at reading your own emotional patterns, you start seeing them in everyone else. And this is where you gain a massive advantage in understanding human behavior. Watch for these patterns. The person who always needs to be right. They're not actually confident. They're deeply insecure and using intellectual superiority to protect themselves from feeling inadequate. The person who's constantly busy and stressed, they're often running from something. Maybe emptiness, maybe fear of irrelevance, maybe uncomfortable emotions they don't want to face. The person who overshares personal information immediately, they're usually seeking validation and connection, but doing it in a way that actually pushes people away. The person who plays the victim in every story, they're avoiding responsibility, because taking responsibility would mean confronting their own role in their problems. The person who name drops and status signals constantly, they don't feel valuable unless others recognize their value. You start to see that behaviors that seem random or irrational are actually perfectly logical responses to emotional needs. The emotional manipulation defense. So how do you protect yourself from people who use these emotional patterns to manipulate you? Defense number 1, create space. Manipulators rely on emotional urgency. Make a decision now. This opportunity won't last. If you really cared about me, you'd do this. Your counter, I need time to think about this. This simple sentence destroys most manipulation attempts. If someone gets angry or pushy when you ask for time, that's all the information you need. People with genuine intentions can wait. Defense number 2, name the tactic. When you sense manipulation, call it out calmly. It feels like you're trying to make me feel guilty to get what you want. I notice you're using urgency to pressure me into deciding. This seems designed to trigger my fear of missing out. Manipulators hate being seen. Once you name what they're doing, it loses its power. Defense number 3, check your emotional state. Before making any decision in response to someone's request, ask, how am I feeling right now? If you're feeling guilty, Anxious, excited, or pressured, that's your signal that emotion is being weaponized against you. Wait until you're calm, then decide. Defense number 4, trust pattern over words. People lie with words. They tell the truth with patterns. Someone says they care about you but consistently puts you down. The pattern is the truth. Someone says they'll change but keeps repeating the same behavior. The pattern is the truth. Someone says they value honesty but lies in small ways. The pattern is the truth. Stop listening to what people say. Start watching what they consistently do. The uncomfortable truth. Here's what I need you to understand, and it might be the most important thing in this entire section. You are not as logical as you think you are. None of us are, and that's okay. That's not a bug. It's a feature. Emotions evolved for a reason. They help us make fast decisions. They connect us to others. They give life meaning and color. The problem isn't having emotions. The problem is being unconscious of them. When you're unconscious of your emotional drivers, you're a puppet. You think you're making free choices, but invisible strings are controlling every move. When you become conscious of your emotional drivers, you become the puppeteer. You can say, I see that I'm feeling fear right now. I'm going to acknowledge that fear, investigate it, and then decide if it's giving me useful information or if it's just my comfort zone talking. You can say, I notice I'm about to make this decision to get validation from others. Let me pause and ask if this is really what I want, or if I'm just performing for an audience. This is the difference between emotional reactivity and emotional intelligence. Imagine walking into a room full of actors, all performing different roles, and nobody, including the actors themselves, realizes they're performing. That's not a metaphor. That's your daily reality. Every person you interact with is wearing at least one mask. Your colleague who seems so confident? Mask. Your friend who appears to have it all together? Mask. The influencer living their best life on Instagram? Industrial strength mask with professional lighting. And you? You're wearing one too. The question isn't whether people wear masks. Everyone does. The real questions are, why do they wear them? What are they hiding underneath? And most importantly, can you tell the difference between the mask and the real person? Because here's the thing that nobody tells you. Most people have been wearing their masks for so long that they've forgotten what's underneath. They've become the character they created. They can't take the mask off even when they're alone. And that's where things get dangerous. The origin of masks. Let's start with why masks exist in the first place. You weren't born with a mask. You learned to wear one. Think back to childhood. You were probably told directly or indirectly, don't cry, be strong. Don't show off, be humble. Don't be too loud, be polite. Don't be too quiet, be confident. Don't be different, fit in. Each of these messages taught you that parts of yourself were unacceptable. So you learned to hide them. You learned to show people what they wanted to see instead of who you actually were. This is called social conditioning, and it's not inherently bad. Society couldn't function if everyone acted on every impulse. We need some level of social filtering. But somewhere along the way, the mask stopped being a tool you used. It became who you are. Let me give you a concrete example. I knew a guy in college, brilliant student, always helpful, never complained about anything. Everyone loved him. He was the nice guy who would drop everything to help you move apartments or study for exams. 20 years later, he had a complete breakdown. Why? Because he'd spent 2 decades being the person everyone needed him to be. He'd built an entire identity around being helpful, agreeable, indispensable. He'd gotten so good at it that he didn't even realize he was performing anymore. He genuinely believed that's who he was. But underneath the mask, a man who was exhausted, resentful, and had no idea what he actually wanted from life because he'd never allowed himself to want anything. The mask had consumed the person. The anatomy of a mask. Not all masks are created equal. Let me break down the most common types you'll encounter, and the ones you're probably wearing yourself. The competence mask. This is the I've got it all figured out performance. People wearing this mask never admit uncertainty. They always have an answer. They project absolute confidence even when they're drowning in doubt. Why they wear it? Because admitting I don't know feels like admitting weakness or incompetence. They believe their value comes from being the expert, the leader, the one who has the answers. What's underneath? Usually profound insecurity about their actual capabilities. Fear that if people see them struggle or fail, they'll be exposed as frauds. How to spot it? Watch what happens when they're genuinely challenged. Do they get defensive? Do they deflect? Do they double down even when they're clearly wrong? That's the mask protecting itself. You see this mask everywhere in corporate America. The middle manager who won't admit they don't understand the new software. The consultant who uses jargon to hide gaps in their knowledge. The entrepreneur who posts only successes on LinkedIn while their business is barely surviving. The cruel irony? People respect you more when you could admit, I don't know, but I'll find out, than when you fake expertise. The perfection mask. This is the I have no flaws performance. People wearing this mask curate everything. Their appearance is flawless. Their home is spotless. Their social media is a highlight reel. They never show vulnerability, never share struggles, never let you see the mess. Why they wear it? Because they believe they're only lovable or worthy if they're perfect. Any flaw feels like a threat to their entire identity. What's underneath? Deep shame about their imperfections. A belief that if people see the real them, messy, flawed, struggling, they'll be rejected. How to spot it? These people can't handle criticism, even constructive feedback. Any suggestion that something could be better feels like a personal attack. They also tend to be secretly exhausted because perfection requires constant vigilance. I had a friend like this. Her apartment always looked like a magazine spread. She always looked put together. Her career trajectory was impeccable on paper, but she was having panic attacks in her car between meetings. She was so terrified of anyone seeing her struggle that she'd isolated herself completely. The perfection mask had become a prison. The victim mask. This is the nothing is my fault performance. People wearing this mask are always the wronged party. Bad things happen to them. Other people are always the problem. They never have agency in their own lives. Why they wear it? Because taking responsibility is terrifying. If they admit they have agency, they have to admit they could have made different choices. It's psychologically safer to be powerless. What's underneath? Usually a combination of learned helplessness and fear of accountability. Sometimes trauma that made them actually powerless at one point, which they've generalized to their entire life. How to spot it? Listen to their stories. In every conflict, every setback, every problem, they're always the innocent victim. There's never any acknowledgement of their role or responsibility. This mask is particularly insidious because it attracts helpers and fixers who want to save the person. But nothing ever changes because the mask itself prevents change. As long as they're the victim, they never have to face their own power or responsibility. The invulnerability mask. This is the I don't need anyone performance. People wearing this mask are fiercely independent. They never ask for help. They pride themselves on being self-sufficient. They often mock people who are needy or emotional. Why they wear it? Because needing others feels dangerous. Usually, they learned early that depending on people leads to disappointment or pain, so they built walls and called it strength. What's underneath? A deep, unmet need for connection, loneliness, sometimes a wound from a time when they were vulnerable and got hurt. How to spot it? Watch what happens when someone offers genuine help or care. Do they deflect with humor? Get uncomfortable? Insist they're fine? That's the mask at work. I wore this mask for years. I took pride in being the person who had everything under control, who never needed support, who could handle anything alone. Then I burned out spectacularly because humans aren't designed to be islands. We're tribal creatures. And pretending otherwise doesn't make you strong. It makes you isolated and brittle. The breakthrough came when I realized asking for help isn't weakness. Pretending you don't need it is. The people-pleaser mask. This is the I just want everyone to be happy performance. People wearing this mask cannot say no. They agree even when they disagree. They prioritize others' comfort over their own needs. They're allergic to conflict. Why they wear it? Because they learned that their value comes from being useful, agreeable, easy. They believe that if they stop pleasing people, they'll be abandoned. What's underneath? A terror of rejection. A belief that their authentic self isn't enough. Sometimes a history where expressing needs or boundaries led to punishment. How to spot it? They rarely express strong opinions. They check how you feel before deciding how they feel. They apologize constantly, even for things that aren't their fault. Here's the trap with this mask. People pleasers think they're being kind, but they're actually being dishonest. They're showing you a version of themselves that doesn't exist. And when the real person inevitably leaks out, when they're exhausted or resentful, everyone's confused because it doesn't match the mask. The mask detection system. So how do you see through masks? How do you identify what's performance and what's real? Here's the framework. Test number 1. The consistency check. Real personality is consistent across contexts. Masks change depending on the audience. Watch how someone behaves with their boss versus their subordinates. How they act in public versus private. How they treat service workers versus people who can benefit them. If there's a dramatic shift, you're seeing masks. The person who's warm and friendly to clients but dismissive to colleagues, mask. They're performing likability strategically. The person who's confident in meetings but anxious one-on-one, mask. They're performing competence for the group. Real traits don't shift dramatically based on context. Test number 2, the pressure test. Masks crack under pressure. Real personality becomes more visible under stress, not less. Notice what happens when things go wrong. Do they blame others or take responsibility? Do they become aggressive or collaborative? Do they shut down or open up? Do they maintain their values or abandon them? This is when you see the truth. I learned this in my first startup. We had a co-founder who was all about transparency and collaboration when things were going well. The second we hit financial trouble, that all disappeared. He became secretive, controlling, and threw team members under the bus to protect himself. That was the real him. The collaborative leader was a mask he wore when it was easy. Test number 3, the contradiction tracker. People with masks have a gap between what they say and what they do. Their stated values don't match their actions. They say family is their priority, but they never make time for family. They say honesty matters, but they lie about small things. They say they value feedback, but they get defensive when you give it. Watch what people do, not what they say. And here's the advanced move. Watch what they do when they think nobody is watching. That's usually the closest you'll get to the unmasked version. Test number 4, the emotional incongruence. Check. This is subtle but powerful. When someone's emotional expression doesn't match the situation, that's usually a mask. They're smiling, but their eyes are dead, performing happiness. They're angry, but the anger feels performative, almost rehearsed, using anger as a control tactic. They're crying, but it escalates when you pay attention and stops when you don't, performing distress for manipulation. Real emotions have a certain quality. They're spontaneous, proportional, and they don't shift based on whether you're watching. Your own masks. Now comes the uncomfortable part. Let's talk about your masks. Because the only way to truly see through others' masks is to first see through your own. And trust me, you're wearing more than you think. Exercise. The 3-mirror test. I want you to think about 3 different contexts in your life. Mirror 1. How you are at work. What personality do you project? Are you more formal, more guarded, more agreeable, more aggressive? Mirror 2. How you are with your family. Does your personality shift? Do you become more childlike, more defensive, more responsible, more authentic? Mirror 3. How you are when completely alone. Who are you when nobody's watching? What do you do? How do you talk to yourself? What rules do you break? Now ask yourself, which one is the real you? If you said all of them, you're being diplomatic, but not honest. If different contexts bring out wildly different versions of you, at least some of those versions are masks. The real you is probably the one you are when alone, when there's no performance needed. But here's the problem. Most people have been performing for so long that they don't even know who that person is anymore. The mask you don't know you're wearing. Here's the most dangerous mask of all, the one you believe is your real face. Let me explain with a story. There was a woman I used to work with. Let's call her Diana. Diana was known for being brutally honest. She prided herself on telling it like it is and not sugarcoating things. She thought this was her authentic self. It wasn't. It was a mask. The real Diana was deeply insecure and afraid of being seen as weak or naive. So she'd constructed a personality around being cynical and harsh. This protected her from vulnerability while making her feel superior. She'd worn this mask so long, she genuinely believed it was her personality. She thought she was being authentic when she was actually performing in vulnerability. The mask only cracked when her partner left her. Suddenly, the "I don't need any one persona" didn't work anymore, and underneath it was someone desperately lonely and terrified of intimacy. How do you spot your own unconscious masks? Ask yourself these questions. What parts of myself do I never show anyone? Whatever you're hiding is probably your authentic self. The part you show is likely the mask. What would I do differently if nobody would ever know? If your behavior would change significantly, you're performing for an audience, not living authentically. What do I get defensive about? The things you can't handle being questioned are usually masks. Real aspects of yourself don't need defending. What aspects of my personality am I most proud of? This might hurt, but the traits you're proudest of are often the most performative. Real traits just are. You don't need to be proud of them because they're not achievements. They're just you. The danger of authenticity. Now, before you go ripping off all your masks in a quest for authenticity, let me give you a warning. Complete authenticity in all situations isn't wisdom. It's social suicide. Some level of social filtering is necessary and healthy. You don't tell your boss every thought you have. You don't trauma dump on strangers. You don't share every feeling with every person. The goal isn't to eliminate all masks. The goal is to know when you're wearing one and why. Conscious masking is fine. You're choosing to present a certain version of yourself for a specific reason, and you know you're doing it. Unconscious masking is the problem when you've worn the mask so long you think it's your face. Here's the distinction. Conscious. I'm going to be more reserved in this job interview because showing my full personality right away might not serve me here, but I know this isn't all of who I am. Unconscious. I am a reserved professional person. This is my personality. Forgetting that you're hilarious and weird with your close friends. The first is strategic. The second is self-abandonment. Reading masks in real time. Let me give you some real-world scenarios and how to read the masks. Scenario 1, the job interview. You're hiring someone. They're impressive on paper. In the interview, they're confident, articulate, have an answer for everything. Mask check. Ask them about a failure, a real one. Watch what happens. If they give you a humble brag failure, I cared too much, that's a mask. If they blame external circumstances entirely, that's a mask. If they get defensive or uncomfortable, that's a mask. If they tell you a real failure and what they learned, you're getting closer to the real person. Scenario 2, the new relationship, you're dating someone. They're attentive, interesting, seem emotionally available. Mask check. Introduce a conflict, a small one. See how they handle disagreement. If they avoid conflict entirely and just agree with you, that's a people-pleaser mask. If they get disproportionately upset or make you the villain, that's a victim mask. If they can disagree without making it personal, you might be seeing the real person. Scenario 3, the business partnership. Someone wants to go into business with you. They're enthusiastic, full of ideas, committed to the vision. Mask check. Observe them over time in lower-stakes situations before committing. How do they handle their current responsibilities? What do people who already know them say about them? Do their actions match their words over a period of months? Time is the greatest mask revealer. Anyone can perform for a day, a week, even a month. But maintaining a mask for 6 months, A year? That's much harder. The unmasking process. So what do you do when you realize you've been wearing masks for years, when you don't even know who you are underneath? The unmasking process is uncomfortable, but it's the only path to genuine freedom. Step 1. Acknowledge the masks. Start naming them. I wear a competence mask at work. I wear a perfection mask on social media. I wear an independence mask with my family. Just naming them reduces their power. Step 2. Understand why you put them on. Every mask served a purpose once. Maybe it protected you from pain. Maybe it earned you love or approval. Maybe it helped you survive a difficult situation. Honor that. The mask wasn't a mistake. It was your psyche doing its best to keep you safe. Step 3. Test removing them in safe spaces. You don't have to go full authentic everywhere immediately. Start small, with people you trust. Show them something real, something imperfect, something you'd normally hide. Notice that the sky doesn't fall. Notice that people often appreciate the realness more than the performance. Step 4. Build tolerance for being seen. This is the hardest part. Being truly seen, flaws and all, is terrifying when you've been hiding for years. But it's also the only way to experience genuine connection. People can love your mask, but that love doesn't touch you. It's not for you. It's for the character you're playing. Only when you're seen as yourself can you be loved as yourself. Step 5. Realize you'll still wear masks sometimes, and that's okay. The difference is now you're conscious of it. You're choosing it strategically rather than living in it permanently. You're the actor who knows they're acting, not the actor who believes they are the character. The mask paradox. Here's the final twist that most people miss. The mask paradox states, the more you try to hide your true self, the more visible it becomes to people who know what to look for. Your mask isn't hiding you. It's highlighting exactly what you're afraid of people seeing. The person who constantly projects success is revealing their fear of being seen as a failure. The person who's always helping others is revealing their fear of being helpless themselves. The person who never shows emotion is revealing how terrified they are of their own feelings. Your mask is a neon sign pointing directly at your wounds. And people with emotional intelligence can read that sign from a mile away. Here's a question that will make you uncomfortable. If you woke up tomorrow with absolute power over 10 people, their careers, their reputations, their livelihoods in your hands, would you still be the same person you are today? Before you answer with an automatic yes, let me tell you what actually happens when people gain power. It's not pretty, and it's not rare. It's predictable. Power doesn't corrupt everyone equally, but it reveals everyone eventually. It's like a chemical agent that dissolves the social masks we talked about in the last section, except what's revealed underneath isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it's something you wish had stayed hidden. And here's the terrifying part. You probably won't even notice it happening to you. The shift is gradual, invisible. You'll have perfectly logical explanations for every small change in your behavior. You'll be the last person to realize you've become someone you used to judge. Let me show you how this works. The metamorphosis nobody sees coming. I want to tell you about James. I met him when we were both junior consultants at the same firm. James was genuinely one of the good ones, collaborative, humble, always credited the team. He'd stay late to help colleagues prep for presentations. He treated the cleaning staff with the same respect he showed senior partners. Everyone loved James. Then James got promoted, and promoted again. Within 5 years, he was a senior partner, and something changed. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow erosion, like a coastline disappearing inch by inch, until one day you realize the beach you remember is gone. First, it was small things. He stopped asking questions in meetings. He started making pronouncements. He stopped saying "we" and started saying "I." When junior consultants made suggestions, he'd listen politely, then do exactly what he'd already decided. But here's what made it insidious. James still thought he was the same person. He still told himself he was collaborative. He still believed he valued input. He'd constructed a narrative where his decisiveness was leadership and his dismissiveness was efficiency. By year 7, James was someone I barely recognized. He interrupted people mid-sentence. He took credit for team wins and blamed individuals for losses. He made decisions that affected people's lives without consulting them, then acted surprised when they were upset. And when someone finally called him out, he was genuinely shocked. "I'm the same person I've always been," he said. "Success hasn't changed me." But it had. He just couldn't see it because he was looking from the inside. The neuroscience of power. Let's talk about what happens in your brain when you gain power, because this isn't just psychology. It's biology. When you acquire power over others, your brain experiences measurable changes. 1. Your empathy circuits literally decrease in activity. Studies using fMRI scans show that people in power positions show reduced neural resonance when observing others' emotions. Translation: you become neurologically less capable of understanding how others feel. This isn't a choice. It's not that you decide to care less. Your brain is physically rewiring itself to prioritize your own perspective over others. 2. Your sense of risk decreases. The same neural systems that make you feel powerful also make you feel invulnerable. This is why powerful people take riskier decisions, engage in more reckless behavior, and genuinely believe rules don't apply to them. It's not arrogance. It's altered threat perception. 3. Your self-serving bias amplifies. Everyone has a self-serving bias. We attribute our successes to our abilities and our failures to circumstances. But power turbocharges this. Powerful people increasingly believe their success is entirely self-made, while their failures are someone else's fault. The more power you have, the less accurate your self-assessment becomes. 4. Your abstract thinking increases while concrete thinking decreases. This sounds positive, but it has a dark side. You start seeing people as categories, resources, statistics, rather than individuals. That employee you're laying off isn't Sarah, single mother of 2, who just bought a house. She's redundant headcount in a restructuring plan. This cognitive shift makes it easier to make decisions that harm people because they're no longer fully human to you. They're abstractions. The power types. Not everyone expresses power the same way. Let me break down the main archetypes you'll encounter and the one you might become. The tyrant. This is the obvious one, the person who rules through fear and intimidation. How they operate: public humiliation, unpredictable anger, making examples of people, creating an environment where everyone's walking on eggshells. Why they do it. Usually deep insecurity masked as strength. They're terrified of being challenged or exposed, so they create an atmosphere where challenge is unthinkable. What's underneath? Often someone who felt powerless earlier in life and swore they'd never be vulnerable again. The tyranny is overcompensation. How to spot them early? Watch how they treat people who can't benefit them. Waiters, assistants, subordinates. If there's contempt there, tyranny is coming. I once worked for a CEO like this. Brilliant strategist, absolute nightmare as a human. He'd scream at executives in front of their teams. He'd demand weekend work on a whim. He'd fire people publicly. His justification: I'm demanding excellence. But that wasn't it. He was demanding submission. Excellence was just the mask. The company made money, sure, but the human cost was astronomical. Divorces, mental health breakdowns, careers destroyed, and he never saw himself as the problem. To him, people who couldn't handle his standards were weak. The manipulator. This type is more subtle and therefore more dangerous. How they operate. They don't demand, they engineer. They create situations where you think you're making free choices, but they've stacked the deck, so there's really only one option. Why they do it? They get a psychological payoff from control that's more sophisticated than crude domination. They want you to choose to serve them. What's underneath? Usually someone who learned early that direct power is too risky or too crude. They developed a taste for puppeteering. How to spot them early. Notice when you feel vaguely obligated or guilty without clear reason. That's emotional manipulation in progress. I had a boss like this. She never ordered you to do anything. Instead, she'd say things like, "Of course it's your choice, but I'd be really disappointed if—" I'm not saying you have to, but the team is counting on. Interesting that you'd prioritize X over Y. Most people would. Every sentence was a psychological pressure point disguised as autonomy. And the genius of it, you couldn't complain because technically she never made you do anything. You volunteered, under conditions she'd carefully constructed. The benevolent dictator. This is the trickiest because they genuinely believe they're the good guys. How they operate. I know what's best for you. They make decisions for your own good without your input. They're patronizing masked as caring. Why they do it? They've conflated power with wisdom. They assume that because they have authority, they have superior judgment about everyone's life. What's underneath? Often someone who needs to be needed. Their identity is wrapped up in being the wise leader, the protector, the one who knows better. How to spot them early. They don't ask questions. They tell you what you need. They dismiss your preferences as misinformed. I see this in a lot of startup founders. They build a company and suddenly they think they know better than their employees about everything. Career choices, personal decisions, life priorities. You should break up with your boyfriend. He's holding you back. You shouldn't take that other job offer. You're not ready. You need to work weekends right now. It's good for your development. They mean well. That's what makes it insidious. They're genuinely trying to help, but they're doing it in a way that strips you of agency and makes you dependent on their judgment. The narcissist. This isn't the clinical diagnosis, though sometimes it overlaps. This is the power type who makes everything about them. How they operate. Every conversation circles back to their achievements. Every success must acknowledge their role. Every failure must exclude their responsibility. Why they do it? Their self-worth is entirely external. They need constant validation that they're special, superior, exceptional. What's underneath? Usually a fragile ego that can't tolerate being ordinary. The grandiosity is protecting a terrified inner child who doesn't feel inherently valuable. How to spot them early. Notice the pronouns. I dominates every story, even team achievements. And notice what happens when someone else gets attention. They'll find a way to redirect it. The narcissist boss is exhausting because you're not working for the company or the mission. You're working to maintain their ego. Your achievements are threatening unless they can claim credit. Your failures are convenient scapegoats. Your role is to make them look good. The ego inflation cycle. Here's how it typically progresses when someone gains power. Watch for these stages in others. Watch for them in yourself. Stage 1, the honeymoon. You get promoted, get authority, get influence. At first, you're consciously trying to be a good leader. You remember what it was like to not have power. You try to be fair. Stage 2, the subtle shift. Small things start changing. You interrupt more because your time feels more valuable. You listen less carefully because you already know what needs to happen. You get slightly irritated when questioned because challenges feel like time wasting. You justify every shift with logic. I'm just being efficient. I need to be decisive. I can't get bogged down in endless discussion. Stage 3, the bubble people start treating you differently. They laugh at your jokes more. They agree with your ideas more. They're more careful around you. You tell yourself it's because you're doing well. But really, they're doing what people do around power. They're managing you. This creates a feedback loop. You think you're more likable, more competent, more insightful than you actually are. Your self-perception becomes increasingly distorted. Stage 4, the insulation. You start surrounding yourself with people who agree with you. You interpret disagreement as disloyalty. You mistake challenge for threat. Bad news stops reaching you, not because things are going well, but because people have learned you don't want to hear it. You're making decisions based on incomplete information, but you don't know the information is incomplete. Stage 5, the reality gap. There's now a significant gap between who you think you are and who you've become, between how you think you're perceived and how you're actually perceived. You think you're respected. You're actually feared. You think you're collaborative. You're actually controlling. You think you're fair. You're actually arbitrary. And because of the bubble, no one's telling you. By the time you realize it, the damage is done. The telltale signs you're changing. If you have any power, and you probably have more than you think, watch for these warning signs. Warning sign number 1, you interrupt more than you used to. This seems trivial. It's not. Interruption is a power move. It signals my time is more valuable than yours, and what I have to say matters more than what you're saying. If you're cutting people off regularly, your ego is expanding. Warning, sign number 2. You've stopped asking questions. When you stop being curious about others' perspectives, you've decided you already know better. This is the beginning of the end of good judgment. The best leaders ask more questions as they gain power, not fewer. Warning, sign number 3. You're surrounded by yes people. Look around. Do people challenge you? Do they bring you problems and uncertainties? Or do they mostly agree, affirm, and tell you what you want to hear? If it's the latter, you've either hired badly or trained them to be agreeable through your reactions to dissent. Warning sign number 4. You've created different rules for yourself. You're late to meetings, but get annoyed when others are. You check your phone during presentations, but expect others' full attention when you speak. You take long lunches, but judge employees who leave early. The moment you believe standards apply differently to you, ego has won. Warning, sign number 5. You talk more about yourself than you used to. Count the I statements in your conversations. Compare it to a year ago. If it's increased significantly, that's ego inflation in real time. Warning, sign number 6. Criticism feels like betrayal. Healthy people can separate feedback from character attacks. When you have power, it becomes harder. Criticism starts feeling like insubordination. If you find yourself thinking, "How dare they?" when someone questions your decision, you're in dangerous territory. Warning, sign number 7. You're less interested in others' lives. When was the last time you asked a colleague about their weekend and actually listened to the answer? When did you last remember details about someone's family or interests? Power breeds self-absorption. If you're less curious about others, you're being absorbed. The defensive mechanisms of ego. When power starts changing you, your ego develops sophisticated defenses to protect the transformation. Understanding these defenses in others helps you spot dangerous leaders. Understanding them in yourself helps you avoid becoming one. Defense number 1, reframing. You're not controlling. You're providing clear direction. You're not arrogant. You're confident in your expertise. You're not dismissive. You're efficiently prioritizing. Every negative behavior gets reframed as a positive leadership quality. Defense number 2, selective memory. You remember your generous moments and forget your petty ones. You remember times you listened and forget times you didn't. Your brain is literally editing your self-narrative to maintain your self-image. Defense number 3, attribution errors. Your successes are because you're talented. Your failures are because your team dropped the ball or circumstances were impossible. You're the hero of every story and the victim of every setback. Defense number 4, comparison shopping. You compare yourself to worse leaders to feel good. At least I'm not as bad as Tyrant X. The bar keeps dropping because you're measuring yourself against the worst examples instead of the best. Defense number 5, intent over impact. I didn't mean it that way. My intentions were good. People are too sensitive. You judge yourself by your intentions while judging others by their impact. This asymmetry lets you excuse behaviors in yourself you'd condemn in others. How to stay grounded. So how do you have power without being corrupted by it? How do you lead without losing yourself? Strategy number 1, build in accountability. The single most important thing you can do is create systems where someone can tell you the truth. This might be a mentor who's senior to you, a coach who has no stake in your success, a peer group that meets regularly, a 360 review process that's actually anonymous and consequential. You need someone who can say you're being an asshole and face no repercussions. Without this, you'll inevitably drift. Strategy number 2, maintain friendships outside your power structure. If all your friends are subordinates, employees, or people who benefit from your favor, you have no friends. You have an audience. Maintain relationships with people who knew you before you had power. People who don't care about your title. People who'll call you out when you're being insufferable. These relationships are your tether to reality. Strategy number 3, regular self-audits. Every quarter, ask yourself, am I interrupting more? Am I listening less? Am I making more unilateral decisions? Am I dismissing concerns more quickly? Am I talking more about myself? Track your behavior over time. Ego inflation is gradual, so you need longitudinal data on yourself. Strategy number 4, actively seek disconfirming information. Your natural tendency will be to seek information that confirms you're doing well. Consciously fight this. Ask people what you could do better. Ask what they wish you'd do differently. Create anonymous channels for feedback. And when you get negative feedback, your first reaction should be curiosity, not defensiveness. Strategy number 5, practice powerlessness. Regularly put yourself in situations where you have no authority. Take a class where you're a beginner. Join a community where your professional status is irrelevant. Travel somewhere you don't speak the language. Temporary powerlessness reminds you what it feels like. This builds empathy muscles that power atrophies. Strategy number 6, the identity test. Ask yourself, if I lost my position tomorrow, who would I be? If the answer is nobody or I don't know, your identity is too tied to your power. This makes you psychologically dependent on maintaining it, which makes you dangerous. You need a self that exists independent of your title. Recognizing power-corrupted people. Now let's talk about identifying when others have been corrupted by power, because this skill can save your career, your relationships, and your sanity. Red flag number 1. They have different stories for different audiences. Listen to how they talk about the same event to different groups. If the story changes significantly based on who's listening, they're managing narratives, not sharing truth. Red flag number 2. They retaliate against challenge. Not in obvious ways necessarily, but notice patterns. Do people who question them end up with fewer opportunities? Do dissenters slowly get frozen out? Healthy leaders welcome challenge. Corrupt leaders punish it subtly. Red flag number 3, they take credit and distribute blame. Watch the pronouns when things go well versus when they go poorly. Success. I implemented this strategy. Failure. The team didn't execute properly. This asymmetry reveals ego-driven leadership. Red flag number 4, they have high turnover in relationships. Not just professionally, personally too. If they're constantly cutting off people, having fallen outs, cycling through teams, the common denominator is them. People don't typically abandon good leaders en masse. Red flag number 5, they're immune to evidence. Present them with data that contradicts their position. Do they engage with it or dismiss it? Power-corrupted people have made their mind their castle. No evidence penetrates the walls. Red flag number 6. They speak poorly of everyone who left. Notice how they talk about former employees, ex-partners, past collaborators. If everyone who leaves is disloyal, ungrateful, or not good enough, the problem isn't all those people. It's the leader. The power ego recovery. What if you're reading this and realizing you've already been corrupted by power? What if you recognize yourself in the warning signs? First, the fact that you can see it means you're not beyond recovery. Truly lost causes can't recognize themselves in the mirror. Here's the path back. Step 1. Acknowledge without justification. Don't explain why it happened. Don't contextualize. Just acknowledge, I've become someone I don't want to be. The explanations are ego protecting itself. Skip them. Step 2. Make specific amends. Think of 3 people you've wronged through your power-corrupted behavior. Apologize specifically. Not, I'm sorry if I upset you, but I'm sorry I took credit for your idea in front of the board. That was wrong. Here's what I'm doing to correct it. This is humbling and necessary. Step 3. Rebuild feedback channels. You've probably trained people not to give you honest feedback. You need to explicitly rebuild that. I realize I've been defensive when criticized. I'm working on that. I need your honesty, even when it's hard to hear. Then prove it by not retaliating when they take you up on it. Step 4. Redistribute power. Look for opportunities to share authority. Delegate decisions you'd normally make. Ask for input before deciding. This isn't weakness, it's leadership recovery. Step 5. Accept that some damage is permanent. Some people you've hurt won't forgive you. Some relationships can't be repaired. Some opportunities are lost. Sit with that. Don't try to fix it or explain it away. Just acknowledge the cost of who you became. Let me show you how easily you can be controlled without even knowing it. Right now, as you're reading this, I'm influencing you, not through force, not through obvious manipulation, but through subtle psychological triggers that your conscious mind doesn't even register. I started this section with a bold claim that created curiosity. I used you to make it personal. I broke it into short paragraphs because your brain processes them faster and feels more engaged. I created a pattern of revelation that keeps you reading, and you didn't notice any of it until I pointed it out. That's how influence works. The best influence is invisible. Now imagine someone using these same principles not to educate you, but to exploit you, to sell you something you don't need, to get you to do something against your interests, to make you believe things that aren't true. It happens every single day, and most people never realize they're being played. The architecture of influence. Here's what most people get wrong about influence. They think it's about charisma, persuasion skills, or being a good talker. It's not. Real influence is about understanding human psychology so deeply that you can predict and direct how people will respond. It's about knowing which buttons to push and in what sequence. Let me show you the fundamental principles. Principle number 1, reciprocity. Humans are hardwired to return favors. When someone does something for you, you feel indebted. This feeling is so powerful that people will return a favor even when the initial gift was unsolicited and unwanted. Watch how this works in sales. The free sample, the no-obligation consultation, the small gift before the pitch. None of these are generosity. They're psychological debt creation. Your brain registers, this person gave me something, I owe them. And now you're more likely to buy, agree, comply, even if you don't want to. You're not being generous back. You're paying an emotional debt you didn't agree to incur. I watched a master manipulator use this in a business negotiation. Before discussing terms, he sent a case of expensive wine to his counterpart's office, unsolicited, with a note saying, "Looking forward to working together." The negotiation hadn't even started, and he'd already created an obligation. When they finally met, the other party felt awkward taking a hard line. they'd accepted the gift. Refusing favorable terms felt like violating reciprocity. He got a deal 30% better than market rate. The wine cost him $200. Principle number 2, commitment and consistency. Once people commit to something, especially publicly, they'll bend over backwards to remain consistent with that commitment, even when it stops making sense. This is why cults start with small asks. Just come to one meeting. Just read this pamphlet. Just try this practice for a week. Each small yes makes the next bigger yes easier. Because humans hate cognitive dissonance. If you said yes to the first thing, saying no to the second thing means admitting your first judgment was wrong. So you say yes again and again, until you're in deep and can't remember how you got there. I saw this in a toxic workplace. The CEO started with reasonable requests. Can you stay an hour late tonight? We're behind on the project. Then, I know it's Friday, but can you work Saturday? Just this once. Then, I need you available on your phone this weekend. Then, actually, weekends are when I do my best thinking. Let's make this our standard. By the time people realized they were working 7 days a week, they'd said yes so many times that saying no felt like admitting they'd been wrong to say yes before. The commitment trap had closed. Principle number 3, social proof. People look to others to determine correct behavior. If everyone's doing it, it must be right. This is why testimonials work, why long lines outside restaurants attract more customers, why laugh tracks exist on sitcoms. Your rational brain might know that other people's choices don't validate your own, but your social brain doesn't care. It sees the crowd and assumes the crowd knows something. I watched a friend fall into a financial scam this way. The investment opportunity seemed sketchy to me, but the promoter had testimonials from dozens of people who'd already profited. My friend's logic: this many people can't all be wrong, except they could and were. The testimonials were fake, but social proof bypassed his critical thinking. Principle number 4, authority. People defer to authority figures even when those authority figures have no actual expertise in the relevant domain. A doctor recommending a financial product, a celebrity endorsing a political candidate. The authority in one area creates a halo effect that transfers to unrelated areas. And here's the kicker: the trappings of authority work even without actual authority. Studies show people are more likely to follow instructions from someone wearing a lab coat even when that person has zero credentials, a title on a business card, a professional-looking website, an impressive office. These are costumes that trigger deference. Principle number 5, scarcity, limited time offer. Only 3 left in stock. This opportunity won't come again. Scarcity creates urgency, and urgency shuts down deliberation. Your brain shifts from, do I want this, to, how do I get this before it's gone? Watch how this plays out in romantic manipulation. The person who's hot and cold, available then distant. They're creating artificial scarcity of their attention and affection. And it works. Because scarcity makes things seem more valuable, whether they actually are or not. Principle number 6, liking. We say yes to people we like, and we like people who are similar to us, complement us, are physically attractive, cooperate with us toward shared goals. Skilled manipulators engineer all of these. They mirror your body language, similarity. They praise you strategically, compliments. They present themselves well, attractiveness. They create common enemies or goals, cooperation. And suddenly, you like them. And because you like them, you trust them. And because you trust them, you're vulnerable. The manipulation defense system. So how do you protect yourself without becoming paranoid and cynical? Here's your framework. Defense number 1. Recognize the pattern. The moment you feel sudden urgency, intense obligation, or unusual compliance, pause. Ask yourself, why do I feel this way? What triggered it? If the answer involves one of the 6 principles above, you're likely being influenced. Awareness breaks the spell. Defense number 2. Separate the person from the request. Manipulators conflate the two. If you really cared about me, you'd do this. Your counter, I care about you and I'm not doing this. These are separate things. Genuine relationships don't require you to violate your boundaries to prove your affection. Defense number 3. Take time. Almost nothing requires an immediate decision. Time is your greatest defense against influence. I need to think about this. Let me sleep on it. I'll get back to you tomorrow. If someone pressures you to decide now, that's a red flag the size of a billboard. Legitimate opportunities can wait. Scams can't. Defense number 4, seek outside perspective. Your judgment is compromised when you're in the influence field. Talk to someone who isn't. Describe the situation to a friend who has no stake in it. Their reaction will tell you if you're being rational or rationalized. Defense number 5, trust the discomfort. Your subconscious often knows you're being manipulated before your conscious mind admits it. That vague feeling of something's off? That's your alarm system. Don't dismiss it. Don't rationalize it away. Investigate it. The ethical influence. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. You also influence people every day. The question isn't whether you have influence. The question is, are you using it ethically? Ethical influence means being transparent about your motivations, respecting people's autonomy, accepting no without punishment, not exploiting vulnerabilities, caring about outcomes for both parties. Manipulation means the opposite of all these things. The line between influence and manipulation isn't always clear. But here's a good test. Would you be comfortable if the person knew exactly what you were doing and why? If yes, it's probably ethical influence. If no, it's probably manipulation. Reading social dynamics. The final skill in this section, reading group dynamics and power structures in real time. Every social situation has invisible hierarchies, alliances, and tensions. Most people can't see them, but once you learn to read them, you'll never be blindsided again. Watch for who defers to whom. The person everyone looks at when a decision is needed. That's real power regardless of title. Who interrupts whom? Interruption patterns reveal dominance hierarchies instantly. Who gets credit? Listen to pronoun usage. Who says I versus we? Who's credited when things go well? Alliance signals. Who sits together? Who references each other? Who defends whom? Status plays. Who name drops? Who peacocks? These are people trying to establish or maintain status. Once you can read the room, you can navigate it strategically. So here we are. You've journeyed through the architecture of human nature. You've seen the masks people wear, the emotions that drive them, the power that corrupts them, and the influence that shapes them. Now what? Because understanding human nature isn't the end goal. Application is. And application requires something most people aren't willing to do. hold two contradictory truths simultaneously. The paradox of understanding. Here's the tension you must learn to live with. Truth number one: people are fundamentally driven by fear, desire, ego, and tribal belonging. They wear masks, they deceive themselves, they'll manipulate you if it serves them. Truth number two: people also deserve compassion, benefit of the doubt, and genuine connection. Cynicism is just another form of blindness. Both are true, always. The amateur learns human nature and becomes cynical. They see manipulation everywhere. They trust no one. They build walls and call it wisdom. The master learns human nature and becomes compassionate. They see the fear behind the aggression, the wound behind the mask, the pain behind the manipulation. But they also set boundaries. They protect themselves. They don't confuse understanding with accepting harmful behavior. This is the razor's edge you must walk. See people clearly without becoming cold. Protect yourself without becoming closed. The practical integration. Let me give you a framework for actually using what you've learned. Level 1. Self-awareness. Everything starts here. Before you can accurately read others, you must read yourself. Daily practice. Before reacting to someone, check your emotional state. What am I feeling right now? Is this feeling about them or about something they're triggering in me? When you judge someone harshly, ask, what part of myself am I seeing in them that I've rejected? When you make a decision, audit it. Is this logic or emotion dressed as logic? This isn't once-in-a-while reflection. This is continuous real-time self-observation. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is reducing the lag time between stimulus and awareness. Right now, you might realize hours later that you were projecting. Eventually, you'll catch it in the moment. That's when real change happens. Level 2. Pattern recognition. Once you're aware of your own patterns, you'll start seeing them in others. Look for repetitive behaviors. What does this person always do when stressed? When praised? When challenged? Emotional tells. What micro-expressions leak through their controlled facade? Consistency gaps. Where do their words and actions diverge? Trigger responses. What makes them disproportionately defensive, excited, or avoidant? The key: don't judge the patterns. Just observe them. When you judge, you're no longer seeing clearly. You're seeing through the lens of your own values and biases. Observe like a scientist, not a judge. Level 3. Strategic response. Understanding doesn't mean accepting. This is where boundaries come in. You can understand that your colleague's backstabbing comes from deep insecurity and still protect yourself from it. You can understand that your partner's controlling behavior stems from childhood abandonment and still require them to work on it or leave. You can understand that your boss's tyranny is overcompensation for their own fear and still find a different job. Compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. Boundaries without compassion is cruelty. You need both. Level 4. Conscious influence. Now you can use your understanding ethically. Instead of manipulation, getting what you want regardless of their well-being, you practice aligned influence, finding where both parties' interests overlap. Examples: instead of, you should do this because I need it, try, here's how this serves both of us. Instead of creating guilt to get compliance, try, making a clear request and accepting either answer. Instead of playing on insecurities to control someone, try, understanding their fears and not exploiting them. The most powerful influence doesn't feel like influence. It feels like collaboration toward mutual benefit. The warning signs. You're slipping. Even with all this knowledge, you can still fall back into old patterns. Watch for these red flags in yourself. Red flag number 1. You're using your understanding as a weapon. I know you're just doing this because of your daddy issues. Understanding human nature to hurt people is psychopathy with a psychology degree. Red flag number 2. You've stopped being surprised by people. If you think you got everyone figured out, you've stopped actually seeing them. You're seeing your models, not reality. Real humans are infinitely complex. The moment you think you understand someone completely, you've replaced them with a caricature. Red flag number 3. You've become the manipulator you learned to spot. Knowledge of influence is a tool. Tools can build or destroy. If you're using these principles to get what you want without caring about the other person, you've become what you studied. Red flag number 4. You've lost empathy in the name of boundaries. Healthy boundaries don't require you to stop caring. If you find yourself genuinely not caring about anyone's well-being but your own, you've overcorrected. The final truth. Let me leave you with the most important insight from everything we've covered. The people who hurt you aren't evil. They're wounded. The boss who belittles you is terrified of being irrelevant. The partner who cheats is running from intimacy. The friend who betrayed you is drowning in their own insecurity. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it explains it. And when you understand the why, you stop taking it personally. You realize their actions were never really about you. You were just the screen they projected their internal movie onto. This is liberating, not because it makes the hurt disappear, but because it returns power to you. You're no longer a victim of someone's random cruelty. You're an observer of their predictable patterns. And observers have choices that victims don't. Your path forward. Here's what I want you to do, starting today. Week 1, self-observation. Track your emotional reactions. Every time you feel something strongly about another person, write it down. Look for patterns in what triggers you. Week 2 to 4, pattern recognition. Pick 3 people you interact with regularly. Observe them without judgment. What patterns emerge? What are their masks? What drives their behavior? Month 2 to 3, strategic boundaries. Start implementing boundaries where you've been too open. Practice saying no. Practice ending conversations that drain you. Notice how people respond. Month 4 to 6, ethical influence. Now practice using your understanding to create better outcomes for everyone. Help people get what they need in ways that also serve you. Year 1 and beyond. Mastery. This becomes second nature. You read people without trying. You protect yourself without building walls. You influence without manipulating. You've integrated human nature into your operating system. The invitation to reality. Understanding human nature is understanding reality, not the reality you wish existed, the reality that actually exists. And yes, this reality includes manipulation, masks, ego, and self-deception. But it also includes profound beauty, because once you see people clearly, with all their flaws and fears and desperate attempts to be okay, you can't help but feel compassion. You realize everyone is doing their best with the tools they have. Some people's best is harmful, and you need to protect yourself from it. But even then, you can see the humanity underneath. This is the ultimate goal, to see clearly and love anyway, to protect yourself and stay open, to be wise without becoming cynical. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. It's also the most worthwhile, because the alternative is living in a world of cardboard cutouts. People reduced to simple labels, motivations reduced to cartoons, relationships reduced to transactions. That's not living. That's surviving. But when you truly understand human nature, when you see the complexity, the contradiction, the beauty, and the brokenness, you're finally awake in a world full of sleepwalkers. And once you're awake, you can never go back, nor would you want to. The final question. I'll leave you with this. Now that you know how human nature works, how people deceive themselves, wear masks, chase power, influence each other, and rarely act from pure logic, what will you do with that knowledge? Will you use it to manipulate and control? Will you use it to protect and withdraw? Or will you use it to connect more deeply, love more wisely, and live more consciously? The choice, as it always has been, is yours. But now, you're making it with open eyes. And that changes everything.